Arkansas passed a law in 1977 that most people have never heard of. It says this: if you own 10 or more acres and keep your sewage system at least 200 feet from any property line, you do not need a permit. No licensed contractor, no government inspection, no fee. You design it, you install it, you move on. That one exemption is why this video exists. Because when you layer it on top of property tax rates that look like a typo, land prices that haven't caught up with the rest of the country, in rural counties that have either never adopted building codes or quietly stopped enforcing them, Arkansas stops looking like a state people pass through. It starts looking like the most financially rational off-grid destination left in the continental United States. We're going through 8 specific towns where those conditions stack hardest. One sits inside a county that has never created a planning department and allows you to run a rental operation without a single county permit. Another is the entry point with the lowest cost of land in the state, with owner financing available at roughly $120 a month. One anchors a county with a property tax rate so low it covers less than $600 a year on a home worth over $150,000. These towns aren't cheap because they're forgotten. They're cheap because legal frameworks, geography, and in some cases a deliberate culture of minimal local governance have converged in a way that is genuinely rare. For a retiree trying to reduce fixed costs to their smallest defensible number, that convergence is worth understanding precisely. Keep one number in mind as we go through each one: 10 acres. That threshold is the legal key that unlocks most of what follows. Here are 8 Arkansas places you can live off-grid for almost free. Fayetteville. Washington County contains some of the fastest growing cities in the country. Fayetteville and Springdale together anchor a metropolitan area pushing 300,000 people. Corporate headquarters, a major university, regional hospitals, and the full retail infrastructure that comes with sustained economic growth. Drive past the city limits and the rules change completely. In the unincorporated portions of Washington County, the planning department does not enforce building codes for single-family homes. Building permits are not required. No structural inspector visits the site. No certificate of occupancy is issued at the end. A homeowner who wants to build a timber frame cabin from trees felled on their own land can do exactly that. No county approval needed. An earthbag structure, a cob build, a straw bale wall, none of those trigger a permit requirement in unincorporated Washington County. The regulatory threshold worth understanding is water. Connect to the county's rural water line and plumbing inspections become mandatory. Run a fully independent system, a private well, or a rainwater array, and that inspection requirement disappears. The county's regulatory reach is tied to its utility network. Step off the network and the county steps back. Land use defaults to agricultural and single-family zoning by right, meaning no variance hearings or conditional use permits are required to establish a homestead. The density standard of 1 unit per acre protects privacy rather than restricting it, and the county does maintain a tiny house framework inside Fayetteville proper. Structures as small as 120 square feet on a permanent foundation are permitted within city limits, but the unincorporated areas around the city carry none of those floor area requirements. No pitched roof standards and no architectural design rules. The freedom of the surrounding land is in direct contrast to the city's own ordinances. The combination that makes this location unusual is the proximity it preserves. A retiree can build from unconventional materials without a permit and still be 20 to 30 minutes from a regional hospital and a full commercial corridor. Most off-grid locations trade convenience for freedom. So unincorporated Washington County offers both. It just requires knowing which side of the city limit line you're standing on. Hot Springs. Most rural counties in the United States have some version of a planning apparatus. A board, a commission, even a part-time permit office. Garland County never built one. The county's quorum court has declined to adopt centralized zoning ordinances or building codes. There is no planning commission. In the unincorporated areas, the county does not issue building permits and does not conduct residential structural inspections. Hot Springs itself operates under its own municipal rules. Historic district requirements, city ordinances, tourism infrastructure. Step outside the city limits and the regulatory environment resets to nearly nothing. What the county does enforce is environmental safety. A floodplain permit is required near flood risk zones and issued at no charge through the county's emergency management office. Projects disturbing more than 5 acres require coordination with the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality for stormwater management. Neither involves fees for a typical homestead scale build. Beyond those specific triggers, the county does not restrict structure type, size, materials, or layout on unplatted rural parcels. No minimum square footage, no foundation requirement, no design standard. The commercial angle is what separates the Hot Springs area from every other location on this list. The county does not issue business licenses. It has no regulations governing short-term or vacation rentals and no occupancy limits for non-municipal properties. A property owner can build and rent off-grid cabins, run a seasonal retreat, or host an outdoor camp without filing a single county-level permit. The sheriff's office enforces general quiet enjoyment standards, but the absence of zoning means a rental compound can sit on the same parcel as a primary residence without legal conflict. For a retiree whose fixed income doesn't cover every line item, converting rural land into a legitimate supplemental income stream without licenses changes the math on the lifestyle. Most locations on this list reduce your expenses. The Hot Springs area is one of the few where you can also add to the income side of the ledger. If seasonal rental income eventually covers the annual property taxes, which are low to begin with given Arkansas's statewide rate structure, the land reaches a point where it financially supports its own existence. That outcome isn't guaranteed. It depends on execution and local demand for off-grid rental experiences. But the legal structure in Garland County makes it possible in a way that isn't true in most rural counties anywhere in the country. Huntsville. Huntsville is the county seat of Madison County, sitting immediately east of the deep rural Newton County corridor and west of the Northwest Arkansas economic hub. That geography makes it one of the more strategically positioned towns on this list, close enough to both directions to draw on the advantages of each. Within Huntsville's city limits, residential codes require a minimum of 576 square feet for primary structures and a permanent foundation. Those rules apply consistently inside town. In the unincorporated stretches of the county surrounding Huntsville, most of Madison County's land area, enforcement is considerably more relaxed, and building practices in the field reflect that looseness. The one firm rule Madison County maintains is septic permitting. Even repairs to existing systems require county approval, with fees between $75 and $250. The county sanitarian enforces this specifically because the underlying aquifers supply water to a large portion of the county. Contamination from failing systems would carry consequences well beyond any individual property, and the oversight is targeted rather than expansive. The workaround is the state exemption on parcels of 10 or more acres, with system components set back 200 feet from any property line. State law overrides the county requirement. A buyer who purchases at the right acreage bypasses Madison County's main regulatory hurdle entirely. The land immediately surrounding Huntsville and extending into Newton County to the west represents the most affordable tier of the Ozark Mountain environment. Newton County's effective property tax rate sits at 0.4%, with a median home value around $160,000 and annual taxes around $645. Those figures reflect the broader region that Huntsville serves as the nearest commercial anchor for. The timber, spring water, and Buffalo National River access that characterize the corridor are accessible from Huntsville within a short drive, and the town itself provides the farm supply stores, fuel, and basic commercial infrastructure that keep a working homestead functional without a long commute. The rainfall in this part of Arkansas also supports off-grid water strategy. The north central region receives around 44.5 inches per year. Non-potable rainwater collection for garden irrigation and livestock watering is unregulated, and on an active homestead, a functional catchment system removes a meaningful operational cost entirely. For a retiree who wants land independence in the Ozark corridor without committing to the deepest levels of rural isolation, Huntsville provides a base. A town with services at the edge of one of the most legally permissive rural environments in the state. Marshall. Every other town on this list has the buyer arriving at the land and working to reduce costs through legal exemptions and tax structure. Marshall, the county seat of Searcy County, anchors a region where the land itself arrives with resources already embedded, and those resources reduce costs before construction begins. Searcy County sits along the Buffalo National River corridor and borders the Ozark National Forest. The timber here is mature, oak, hickory, and mixed hardwoods that have been growing on rugged terrain for decades. For an off-grid resident, that timber is a heating system and a building material that requires no purchase and no shipping. It's already on the property. The water water picture is equally significant. Many Searcy County parcels feature year-round springs or wet weather creeks. Well drilling in rural Arkansas carries real cost and geological uncertainty. When a spring is already flowing on the property, that entire line item disappears before you've broken ground. Recent market data shows large tracts bordering the National Forest listing around $2,200 per acre. Smaller parcels with existing off-grid cabins have appeared as low as $94,500, a price that eliminates the most logistically demanding phase of the build entirely. Arkansas receives substantial annual rainfall. The north-central regions average around 44 to 47 inches per year. In Searcy County, that precipitation feeds the creeks and springs running through rural parcels and makes non-potable rainwater collection viable for garden irrigation and livestock use without any permit requirement. On a homestead with active agriculture, a functional rainwater system is a resource that costs nothing to collect once the infrastructure is in place. Marshall itself carries the essential supply chain for working homesteads, farm stores, and livestock supplies. Larger commercial needs require a drive to Mountain Home or Harrison, but the basic inputs of rural life are available locally without a long commute. The county's effective property tax rate is 0.44%, and the maximum sales tax runs 9.5%. Lower than several neighboring counties. Yet that difference compounds across years of purchasing agricultural supplies, tools, and fuel, timber for heat, springs for water, a lower sales tax on everything you buy. Each is a separate budget line that runs lower in Searcy County than in most comparable rural environments, and Marshall is the town that keeps the supply chain running underneath it. Horseshoe Bend. Most of the towns on this list require meaningful upfront capital. A 10-acre parcel at $2,000 to $3,000 per acre still demands a purchase in the tens of thousands before the key legal exemptions apply. Horseshoe Bend is where the entry point drops to a level that nearly anyone can reach. Small lots in Horseshoe Bend, ranging from a quarter to 3/4 of an acre, sell for as little as $2,000 to $4,000. Many sellers offer owner financing with monthly payments around $120. That is a land payment that fits inside almost any fixed retirement income without restructuring the rest of the budget. The trade-off is clear and worth stating directly. These lots are too small to trigger the 10-acre septic exemption. And some carry restrictions that larger rural parcels don't face. A quarter-acre lot in a small Arkansas community is not the same regulatory environment as an unrestricted 10-acre parcel in the National Forest Corridor. The full legal toolkit doesn't apply here in the same way. What Horseshoe Bend provides is a starting point, a place to be on the land while building savings toward a larger purchase nearby. Owner financing at $120 a month requires no bank qualification, no credit approval process, no significant down payment. For a retiree who has been priced out of every other rural land market and wants to begin the off-grid transition without waiting years to accumulate a conventional budget, a $2,000 lot with a manageable monthly payment is a functional first move. Izard County's broader land market averages around $2,771 per acre across unincorporated areas. The next step, a 10+ acre parcel that unlocks the state exemptions, remains within reach from Horseshoe Bend. A buyer who starts on a small lot and saves for a few years is positioned to transition to unrestricted acreage nearby, at which point the full legal toolkit opens. No building code enforcement, no permit requirements, and no septic permitting on the qualifying parcel. The micro lot is not the destination. It's the door into the county and into a purchase sequence that ends at genuine land autonomy. Melbourne and Oxford. Step outside Horseshoe Bend's small community structure into the unincorporated land near Melbourne and Oxford, and the regulatory picture shifts completely. Land in this corridor is widely classified as unrestricted. No building codes, no permit requirements, no minimum square footage. The full legal toolkit that applies in the most permissive Ozark counties applies here. At Izard County's land prices, at roughly $2,700 per acre, a 10-acre parcel in this corridor, enough to trigger the septic exemption and establish genuine land autonomy, is available for under $30,000 at many listings. That is a fraction of what comparable acreage costs in most off-grid destinations that have attracted wider attention. At that price, the annual property tax on the land amounts to a few $100s. The cost of simply holding the property year after year is lower than most people's monthly phone bill. The surrounding region reinforces the value case. Fulton County, directly to the north, offers 11-acre parcels listed around $48,000 total, with an effective property tax rate of 0.47% and median annual taxes around $473. That land borders public forests and river systems, and hunting and fishing in the Fulton-Izard corridor function as genuine subsistence tools. White-tailed deer, turkey, freshwater fish across multiple seasons represent a consistent reduction in grocery costs that doesn't appear on any official cost of living index, but compounds meaningfully over a retirement timeline. Izard County's effective property tax rate runs around 0.6%. Slightly higher than some Ozark neighbors. But on land at this price point, the annual tax burden remains modest in absolute terms. The area near Melbourne maintains local health units and basic supply infrastructure. The North Central Plateau, where Melbourne and Oxford sit, hasn't attracted the same attention as the Western Ozarks, and the land pricing reflects that gap. For a buyer who has done the research rather than followed the crowd, this corridor offers the same fundamental advantages at a significant discount. Mountain View. Stone County makes its case first with a single number, 0.34%. That is the effective property tax rate, the lowest of any county in this video. On a home valued at the county's median of around $153,000, the annual tax bill comes to approximately $528. Among rural counties that combine meaningful natural resource access with proximity to regional services, that figure is genuinely difficult to match anywhere in the United States. Mountain View, the county seat, carries a national reputation as the folk music capital of Arkansas, a title backed by weekly public performances, annual festivals, and a community identity built around traditional Ozark music. And that cultural infrastructure provides something the more remote counties on this list cannot: a built-in social environment for retirees who value community alongside land independence. The town has galleries, craft traditions, and a calendar of public events that run through the year. The county's economic base runs on poultry, ranching, and timber, and that foundation produces a social and political climate with deep respect for working land and property rights. Rural areas of Stone County operate with minimal building oversight for unincorporated land. Alternative construction methods don't generate the friction here that they produce in more regulated counties. The building culture and the political culture are aligned in a way that matters practically for anyone planning to build outside conventional methods. The resource picture tracks with the broader Ozark environment. Timber is dense and mature. Arkansas's riparian water rights framework applies to surface water access on bordering parcels. The 10-acre septic exemption applies on qualifying properties. Solar potential across the four-season climate supports a hybrid energy approach: solar panels for electricity, wood stoves for heat. And on a heavily wooded rural parcel, the fuel for that stove is already standing. The annual cost of heating drops to the labor of cutting and splitting it. Stone County also carries no inheritance tax at the state level, which for a retiree, planning an estate has long-term implications. The property transfers to heirs without a state-level tax event on top of the already low-cost land base. The full fiscal picture: low property taxes, no inheritance tax, some moderate income tax rate, and land that produces its own fuel and food, adds up to a retirement cost structure that is difficult to match in states with conventional regulatory and tax environments. Mountain View delivers the same legal and natural advantages as the more remote Ozark counties at the lowest property tax rate on this list, anchored by a town that provides genuine cultural and social infrastructure in addition to the land itself. Mountain Home. Every location on this list involves a trade-off between cost and access. The more remote the county, the lower the carrying costs, and the longer the drive when something goes wrong medically. Mountain Home resolves that tension more directly than any other town in this video. Mountain Home is the Baxter County seat, and it has a regional medical center, not a clinic, not a rural health unit. A full-service hospital. For a retiree managing chronic conditions, recovering from a procedure, or simply unwilling to be 2 hours from emergency care, that fact changes the calculus on what the off-grid lifestyle actually looks like over a decade. The Arkansas hub-and-spoke healthcare model places even remote Baxter County parcels within 60 to 90 minutes of advanced care, and Mountain Home's facility is well within that range for most of the county's rural land. The surrounding county land remains largely unzoned and unregulated, unregulated. The same off-grid legal framework that applies in Madison or Searcy applies in unincorporated Baxter County. Building permits are not the county's primary tool. Alternative structures, unconventional materials, owner-built systems on qualifying 10-plus acre parcels. These don't face the friction they would in a more regulated environment. The difference from more remote counties is that a cardiologist is a short drive away, not a long one. The White River runs through Baxter County, and the trout fishing it produces is not a tourism line item for residents living off the land. It is a consistent protein source across seasons. See, combined with the timber and water rights framework that apply throughout the Arkansas Ozarks, Mountain Home anchors a region where the natural resource picture is substantively the same as the more remote Ozark counties, with a shorter drive to a hospital added into the calculation. The median home value in Baxter County sits around $155,000. The effective tax rate of 0.46% is modestly higher than Stone County's, but reflects an infrastructure return in healthcare and commercial access that is real and measurable. The state's hub-and-spoke healthcare model places even remote Baxter County parcels within 60 to 90 minutes of advanced care, and Mountain Home's regional facility is well within that range for most of the county's rural land. And for a retiree who has looked at this list and concluded that the most remote options carry too much risk as the years accumulate, Mountain Home is not a compromise. It is the version of this lifestyle that accounts for the full arc of retirement, not just the first decade of it. Off-grid independence and medical proximity are not a contradiction. They're just a county-level decision, and Baxter County has made it easy to choose both. In 8 towns, one legal structure underneath all of them, Arkansas has assembled through a 1977 health regulation, through riparian water rights doctrine, through persistent rural governance culture, and through property tax policy. Conditions that compound in ways most retirement planning conversations never surface. The septic exemption is the clearest mechanism. A permitted system in most states costs $10,000 to $15,000 and involves months of contractor coordination and agency review. On 10 or more acres in Arkansas, with system components 200 feet from any property line, that cost is zero. No licensed contractor required, no permitting timeline, no fee. The most fundamental infrastructure requirement of any residence is owner-controlled on qualifying land. And the water follows the same logic. Surface water access for domestic use requires no permit under the riparian doctrine. Private wells are unmetered. The two most basic resource needs, water in, waste out, sit outside the permitting system on a sufficiently sized parcel, and handling them costs close to nothing beyond initial installation. What this means in practice is that Arkansas has created, through a combination of old law and minimal rural governance, a financial architecture that most states have effectively closed. Building departments, mandatory licensed contractors, metered utility connections, permit fees stacked on permit fees. Those costs are policy choices, not inevitable features of owning land. In these 8 Arkansas towns and the counties surrounding them, many of those choices were never made. Or were made in the property owner's favor. The state's median effective property tax rate sits at 0.52%. Among the lowest in the nation and ranked 39th. Its inheritance tax is zero. Its income tax for most retirees drawing modest fixed income lands in a moderate range. The fiscal architecture as a whole is not accidental. Arkansas has structured its revenue system in a way that consistently rewards owning land, consuming less, and producing more on site. The trade-off deserves honesty. Sales tax runs high, up to 12% in some counties. The state's low property taxes are partially offset by that consumption rate, which means the off-grid lifestyle is the financially rational response to how Arkansas collects revenue. Produce more on your land, buy less at a register, and the tax burden shrinks. The structure rewards self-sufficiency in a way that compounds over a long retirement. The most affordable towns are anchored in the most remote counties. Marshall and Huntsville require a genuine tolerance for distance from advanced services. That is not a trivial ask, and it grows less trivial as retirement progresses and healthcare access shifts from a preference to a necessity. Mountain View and Mountain Home exist on this list because the version of this lifestyle with services nearby has towns built for it too, and the fiscal picture there is still among the most favorable anywhere in the country. The legal exemptions are codified, the tax rates are documented and publicly verifiable. The land prices reflect a market that has not yet caught up to what these counties offer. Yet for a retiree whose priority is reducing the fixed cost of existence to its smallest defensible number, while maintaining full legal autonomy over the land, these 8 Arkansas towns are not a vague suggestion. They are a specific researched answer.